1,000 ants versus centipede. Guys, today we have a video from Frog Made This, and I swear this guy is playing Squid Games with different insects. Anyways, let's check this out. This is my first time reacting to a video like this, so let me know if you guys want to see more videos like this, and shout out to Frog Made This. I'll leave the video link down below. Let's get to it.
This is 1,000 ants in captivity, and in this clip
huge.
I'm holding a venomous Mediterranean centipede. So the question is, could a single venomous centipede survive against an army of 1,000 ants, or would the ants slowly bring it down with nothing but numbers?
They just said ants.
Well, in this video I'm gonna test that alongside tons of different scenarios to see just how capable ants really are.
Dude.
The problem is the 1,000 Campeonatus ants we have don't really like to be filmed under bright light. So we're just gonna have to order a different species of ants.
What the dude? $500? What do people usually do with insects like this? Why? There's got to be a reason why they sell these insects in the first place. Like, what is this for? To feed, like, I don't know, other animals, I guess, like snakes?
Well, this is not going to be cheap, but because I saved on delivery, it actually took a full week for the ants to arrive to my doorstep.
I would be so scared to make a video like this. I'd be terrified.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's a lot of ants. And if you look close, these are harvester ants, which amazingly are equipped with one of the most painful ant stings in North America and humongous mandibles, meaning the ants will have a big chance of fighting off potential predators. But will that be enough to beat the centipede?
Reminds me of that like Coyote Peterson guy.
Now, before we can do anything with the 1,000 ants we just bought, the ants are going to need a nest. Since there's a bunch of things planned for them, going from easy to medium to extremely hard. So let's go ahead and start building the ant nest, and for that let's just use an aquarium I have laying around and that we're going to slightly modify. And by modify I mean drill a hole in the aquarium. Oh yeah, look at that, it turned out perfect. And we're going to use the hole we just drilled to connect a tube to the nest that later on will be used to let the ants leave the nest for all of the different tasks we have planned. But with the aquarium ready, let's quickly add the sand and press it in so that the ants can freely build up the nest. So now it's finally time to release the 1,000 harvester ants into the aquarium. And although everything seemed normal at the moment, we were oblivious to the fact that we completely forgot to prep the walls of the nest. And within moments, we had a disastrous amount of ants escaping. So
bro!
We had to fix this very carefully and very fast.
Dude, you see like some crawling around on the table already.
Very venomous ants roaming the room was a terrible thing. So all we could do is paint the wall with baby powder and pray none of the ants escaped too far. And luckily for us, the crisis was successfully averted and none of the ants escaped. So next up, all we had to do is wait for the ants to start building their nest, which they began to do immediately. So now that we have the ants actually digging up the nest, we're gonna have to give them some water so that they don't dehydrate. Because for the next couple of days, all the ants will be doing is hard labor. Since if you look close enough, the ants move tiny bits of the sand one piece at a time. A process that is definitely tiring and time-consuming. But ants are fascinating creatures. Within just a day or two, they had completely transformed the aquarium into an intricate network of tunnels, complete with massive
grinding out here.
chambers.
Hold on, did I just see a dead ant?
Aquarium into an intricate network of tunnels, complete
I swear
with
those
massive
are pieces
underground
of ant.
chambers, all by working together as a perfectly coordinated team. And they moved so much sand that they ended up burying the water tube we had given them. But that means the ants are finally ready for their first challenge, taking on the Venus flytrap,
the piranha
predator of the
That's what I like to call it.
It may look harmless at first glance, but it has evolved into one of nature's most efficient killers. Hidden inside are tiny trigger hairs, and the moment
I didn't know they had those little
them,
tiny
the trap rapidly closes and starts digesting the insect, eventually leaving behind nothing but an empty shell to be carried away by the wind. So why on earth are we putting the ants through this? Well, the goal is simple: train them to recognize and avoid danger. Since finding the centipede, well, that's not gonna be easy, and they're gonna need all the training they can get. So we began by placing some seeds into several of the Venus flytraps, since in nature seeds are the main source of food for harvester ants, and their mission is going to be carefully retrieving the seed and carrying it safely back to the nest. So can they do this? Well, let's find out. Here you can see the very first explorer ant setting off to investigate the brand new world we had just built for the colony. And within moments, he had already wandered over to the Venus flytraps to check them out. But somehow he completely avoided the dangerous plant and just kept exploring like nothing was there. While more and more ants were starting to reach the challenge through the entrance. And just like that, we had our first two explorers, Beep and Bob, start the challenge. Suddenly, Beep noticed a seed inside the flytrap, but he had no idea he was already making a fatal mistake. Unfortunately for Beep, he'll become nutrients for the plant, while the rest of the colony hopefully learns from his mistake. Shortly after that, we had another ant interested in the Venus flytrap, but the thing is, this flytrap was empty, and what the ant was actually interested in is the nectar that the Venus flytrap produces to attract insects. However, it seems the ants are learning a thing or two, and he left the trap safely, something I hoped would happen with the rest of the ants.
Smart one.
And as time was flowing, the ants were starting to get comfortable around the Venus flytraps, which only meant it was a matter of time before these ants succeed. But then we spotted one of the bravest ants yet, casually walking all over the flytraps. Either he was fearless or he had absolutely no idea how dangerous the plant actually was. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, the ant was actually trying to pick up the seed. Okay, maybe we had made this challenge a little too difficult. Every time an ant tried to grab the seed, it would brush against the trigger hairs, causing the trap to snap shut and turn the unfortunate ant into nutrients. And trust me, we were ready to give up and move on to the next challenge. But something about this flytrap was different. Sure enough, only a few moments after setting up the camera, another ant climbed inside to inspect the seed. Somehow, despite walking all over the trap, it managed to avoid triggering it. After struggling to get a good grip, the ant finally picked up the seed and walked right out of the flytrap without a single scratch. It immediately raced through the tube all the way back to the nest, completing the very first challenge for the entire colony and earning everyone a well-deserved reward, which means we can now move on to the next challenge, the tightrope of Zeus. Yep, that's right, the second challenge is this thing. The ants will have to walk across this extremely narrow tightrope over a lake of acidic water.
What the heck?
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. That would probably be illegal. It's just normal water.
But they'll still drown,
if the ants do manage to fall, they will end up swimming in this lake, which could result in them drowning. But ants are known to be good swimmers that can even build floating rafts just to survive a flood. So this challenge was going to be very interesting. And well, to complete it, all the ants have to do is just walk over the thread like it's just another Monday, grab a seed of their choice, and walk all the way back to the ants' nest.
Dude, you fed them so much, they probably don't even want more food.
Let's find out. But before we get to that, if you're watching this video in the first couple of months of its release, you still have a chance to subscribe before we hit 1 million subscribers. You see, ever since we were kids, my cousin and I have always dreamed of doing this together.
I hope you guys hit a million,
making our childhood dream come true,
this is a really good video.
Please consider subscribing. It would really mean a lot to us. Now back to our second challenge.
This is my first impression of Frog made this, and so far so good.
The starting point, and its very first objective was simple: find the thread, which I'm assuming shouldn't take that long since there's nothing else on the platform. But nonetheless, ants were starting to enter the second training camp, and I was interested to see if the ants can actually walk on the thread.
There's 4 different challenges,
That's
right?
still something we're gonna have to discover, because for some reason the ants were just completely ignoring the thread. Not only that, but one of them actually managed to fall into the water in the first couple of minutes of this challenge. And what's interesting is that the ant isn't actually drowning. If you look close enough, you can actually see that the ant is trying to swim. But considering these are my pets, I decided to help out the ant by pulling it out of the water. And then my cousin was trying to show the ant where to go, but the ant had different plans and it just jumped back into the water. But not to worry, Baloney was the chosen one. He immediately figured out where to go, and just like that, the chosen one failed. Honestly, we had no idea why the ants were struggling that much to find the thread, until we stumbled across something very interesting. As it turns out, ants don't actually have perfect vision. In fact, they see the world very blurry, relying mostly on movement and changes in light to navigate. So with that in mind, we helped the colony learn exactly where the thread was. And just like that, the ant understood where to go. Slowly but surely, it was making progress, carefully walking all over the water lake. And honestly, this was amazing to watch in real life.
Nice.
To see the ant finally reached the other side was great. So now the easy part was officially over, and next up came the real challenge.
Actually taking it back.
The ant had to grab a seed and take it back home, which on paper sounds easy, but who knows what's going on inside of that tiny brain. However, the longer we watched, the more it seemed like the ant was carefully picking the perfect seed.
Yeah, they gotta take like the smaller seed,
you know? Carefully watching, and yeah, it left. But moments later, the ant was back, and this time it was most definitely choosing the right seed. But before taking it back to the colony, it stopped to groom itself.
It's kind of cute,
and it
man.
might even seem like a strange time to do this. But remember when I mentioned that ants don't have perfect vision?
Why are they
Well,
shaped
that's
like
because
that?
their antennae are their most important tool, and they use them for almost everything they do. So keeping them clean is essential.
He's working alone,
this ant was doing everything exactly right. However, it decided to leave without grabbing anything.
Yeah,
but
he's like, I'll bring back some
the
friends.
thread with a chemical trail. And not only that, but it was also sharing the information it gathered with the rest. So at that point, I was certain that soon enough we'll see one of the ants complete this challenge. And the more ants climbed onto the platform, the more we had to keep a close eye on them so that we wouldn't miss the big moment. And then it finally happened. One of the ants picked up a piece of food and began carrying it back
like a broken
home.
piece
and although it got a bit lost in the way, it still managed to find the right path back to
they're
the
low-key
thread.
like
and
spiders.
since this was a special little ant,
were
we named
walking
him Michael.
upside down.
Michael's task was not
Michael?
easy. It seemed like he was struggling to keep his balance because the piece of food he was carrying wasn't tiny. And despite getting so close to the finish line, Michael still had to fight his way through, forcing every bit of strength he had to keep moving forward. Nonetheless, he pulled through and completed the challenge like an absolute champion, earning the colony some extra food, but also bringing the ants one step closer to being ready for the final boss, Centipede.
We've got one more
before
challenge.
they can face their final opponent, there was one more challenge left, and that of course is 1,000 mealworms. Yep, we definitely counted them, and this time there's gonna be a time limit and a special arena for the ants to fight
1,000
in.
worms
I'll explain a bit more while we drop all 1,000 mealworms
ants.
into this enclosure. And what we wanted to see is if the ants
My
can actually
God.
hunt down their own prey. Since up until this point, we've been training the ants to do everything else except hunting. So for this challenge, we're giving the ants 1 hour to defeat as many mealworms as they can.
Look at
and
that
let me tell you
one.
something, the
They're
ants
all
weren't
tweaking
messing
out.
around. Immediately, they started attacking anything that
they're
was
eating.
moving. And although the sheer number of mealworms would probably scare anyone, the ants didn't
They
run.
were hungry.
In fact, the ones trying to escape were the mealworms, and they were doing so while being bitten and stung by the ants. And slowly, the giant pile of worms started to spread out, making it even easier for the ants to surround them.
These guys
but
are about
even
to
the
start
mealworms that were still
feasting.
back together didn't stand much of a chance. The ants were literally just walking all over them like this was not even a threat. And after just a few minutes of watching, I finally noticed the first mealworm that had actually been injured. You can see some of the white fluid leaking from its body. This is actually hemolymph, which is basically the insect equivalent of blood. So every ant attacking a mealworm would eventually penetrate the skin and injure it. But I noticed something else. Even the worms that were in the middle of transforming into pupae weren't being ignored. And one of the ants was repeatedly stinging it, trying to immobilize it. But for some weird reason, the venom was not working on the mealworm. Not only that, some even managed to escape the danger and were just wandering around the arena. Psych! The ants were not about to let anyone escape.
You're not
and
safe.
that's where things got even more interesting. The ants started trying to pick up the mealworms and maybe carry them back to the nest, which honestly I found very hard to believe that this was even possible. I mean, a full mealworm is so much bigger than a single ant, so I think a single ant would really struggle to move a mealworm on its own. But little did I know, ants are capable of carrying objects many times heavier than their own bodies. So maybe, just maybe, this could be possible, especially since there were other ants coming in to help, giving them an even better chance of success. But the mealworm wasn't about to give up. It kept struggling and wiggling around, because for it, this wasn't just a challenge, it was a matter of survival.
Would they even fight?
And if it kept fighting hard enough, maybe
mealworms are
the
so
ants
useless,
would
like they
just
can't
give
fight back
up.
at all.
However, for this mealworm, this wasn't the case. The ant had a mission: bring back the feast to the nest. And no matter how slippery the tube was, the ant wasn't giving up. It kept slipping and falling and getting back on track to feed the colony. And no matter how hard it tried, it fell again and again and again. But then something changed in the way it was gripping the mealworm. And this was the first time the ants were so close to completing the mission. With only 17 minutes left on the clock, the ants started working as a team. And at this point, I was very interested to see what would happen with the mealworm that is still alive, by the way, in the middle of the nest full of ants. And as expected, they gave it no chance. But the mealworm fought with every last ounce of strength it had until eventually it disappeared into the darkness of the sand. But the ants still had 15 minutes left on the clock, and they were not slowing down.
They're bringing
they continued
them back.
bringing mealworms mealworm after mealworm after mealworm
Poor
working
mealworms.
as a team, giving us the ultimate answer that they were ready for the
Oh my
centipede.
gosh, this
And
is
as
it.
the timer struck 0, the ants
I'm so
pulled
ready
the
for
last
this.
mealworm. So
Here
their
we go.
training was now complete. They had learned to
Centipede
recognize
time.
danger, they had proven their agility, and they had shown us just how well they could work together as a colony. So without wasting any more time, they were ready for the boss centipede. And we decided to give them yet another arena specifically for this fight. And as you can see, the ants are already familiar with the terrain, and there's a bunch of them just roaming around waiting for food. But they still have the freedom to leave the arena at any given moment. So if the ants will fight the centipede, that is by choice. And that is because this fight will be very, very hard.
But forget all that. Look at the
1,000
centipede,
ants.
guys. Yeah. That is actually scary. I shouldn't be holding this.
And the reason it's scary is because the centipede
poisonous.
is venomous, meaning it's designed to cause intense pain. And
my
we're going to be
gosh.
releasing it into 1,000 ants to see how exactly they will deal with such a dangerous arthropod. And there you go. The fight begins right now with the centipede running all over the place like a crazy maniac. But we were training the ants exactly for
trying to
this
climb
moment.
out.
And although it looks like the centipede is just trying to run away, if you look close enough, the ants are already swarming
He's getting
it, and
attacked.
the centipede is starting to
Will he
slow
fight back?
down.
Will it
However,
fight
that
back?
doesn't mean it will not fight back, because at the moment it's just searching for a way to avoid fighting.
Dude, he's
whereas
chilling.
the ants
He's
are
got, like,
already
armor or
trying to deal
something.
damage, and by the looks of it, they're kind of succeeding.
got, like,
and we
protection
can see
3
that there's a
armor.
bunch of ants attacking it at the same time. There's at least 30 right now climbing on it, biting it, and stinging it.
It's
so
not
if the
even doing
centipede
anything
doesn't
to him.
change its strategy, it's going to lose. And when I actually started to feel bad for it, it struck back. And yeah, what you're seeing over there is venom being injected into the ant, which means it's definitely going to die.
ant.
And up until this moment, we really wanted the ants to
Is that
succeed.
blood?
But the longer we observed the
I don't know if
centipede,
that's
the
blood
more
or
we
not.
understood the mistake we made. The centipede was killing off our pet ants one by one. And
that
no matter
red
how many
stuff.
ants were
that
swarming
blood?
it felt
Can't
like they
tell, to
didn't
be
do
honest.
any damage. Whereas every time the centipede struck,
like, aren't
we
they
would lose an
cold-blooded?
ant. So
Wouldn't
we
it be
decided
blue?
enough was enough and pulled the centipede out of the arena. But unfortunately, a few of the ants were holding onto it. So at that
Dang.
point, all we could do is watch the centipede annihilate the ants. And honestly, it didn't even take that long before it finished off the final
I feel like
ant.
he should have
So
put
in
it
the end,
into
the
the
centipede
original
was so much stronger, meaning
colony.
the ants weren't ready. So next time, we'll train them even better.
Oh, come on, dude. That wasn't even 1,000. They should have put it into the big
Finished
one,
off
you know?
the final ant. So in the end, the centipede was so much stronger, meaning the ants weren't ready.
They
so
were
next
ready.
time we'll train.
They should have put it. They should have put the centipede in this one. But then, you know, it would have been like cruel to do that to the centipede. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video from Frog Made This. Shout outs to them. The link will be down below to their original video. Let me know if you guys want to see more videos like this in the future. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time, all right? Peace.